Matthew Fisher has spent 3 decades living around the world as a foreign affairs correspondent in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. As such, he has a unique perspective on what 2013 holds for the world and the role Canada can play on that stage. And joining us now for more, Matthew Fisher, international affairs columnist for Post Media News and Canada's longest-serving foreign affairs correspondent. We're always happy to welcome you back to our studio.
Thank you for having me, Steve.
Thanks for being here. Well, let's start with Asia, because you've been all over lately. The Obama administration has announced what it's calling a bit of a pivot towards Asia, and they announced that about a year ago. What does that pivot mean, as far as you know?
Well, it means an awful lot, and I think it has not yet registered really with Canadians how much it means. We still, whether you're a newspaper or a journalist or a member of the public or a politician, we're still more Eurocentric, I think, than we should be. So much is going on there. A lot of it is because of China, obviously. It's also because of India, and this started before Obama. Obama announced it about a year ago, but the shift actually began a few years earlier, I think, and would have been more profound, except that the wars in the Middle East slowed the process down a bit. But now it's starting again with a vengeance.
But a pivot from what to what?
No longer is the Middle East the center of so much American attention. That's what it looks like going forward. And certainly Europe isn't really on the list anymore in the way it used to be. It just isn't and won't be, I don't think. In terms of substance, it's about moving ships, moving hardware, and if you look at a map, it's about hemming in China. That's what China certainly thinks. There's an interesting dynamic there, because in the Middle East, we're used to the United States being the bogeyman. It's hated everywhere, it's reviled. In Asia, this was the idea during the Vietnam War. But today, Americans, I saw this in Burma when President Obama was there about 6 weeks ago. They love America now. And they love America not really, of course, because they love America. They love America because they don't like China. And China now has enemies absolutely everywhere. South Korea is at odds with them. So is Japan, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, Indonesia, Vietnam. Burma is very friendly to China, but its people are not. Its government has been, but the people have deep reservations. Only Cambodia, that's really China's only friend there, and everyone, the politicians and the public, they're asking the United States to come back. And I saw this when I was in Australia last year in Darwin in the north. The United States Marine Corps has established a base there, and about 3,000 Marines are based there permanently, but they don't say they're there permanently because they all rotate through. They don't bring their wives and kids, and this allows them to say it's really a temporary base, but it is not a temporary base at all.
Plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability.
Okay, you've listed. Okay, you said Burma. You said Australia. You've been to the Philippines as well in the last little while. Anywhere else I need to know about?
Well, I've been to Japan, and I've been to Hong Kong, and I've been to Thailand and New Zealand in the area as well.
And officially, the pivot is going over how?
Well, right now it's largely military, and the U.S. is moving warships into the Pacific Ocean. They're taking them off the East Coast. It's interesting for Canada because Canada hasn't moved a darn thing. And usually we're in some kind of lockstep with what the Americans are doing. That is not the case yet. In fact, a Canadian cabinet minister told me that we will not move one person out of Nova Scotia as long as the Harper government is in power. I don't know if that's true or not.
As long as Peter MacKay's in defense.
That might be.
That might have something to do with it, too.
That might have something to do with it, yes. And yet, the game really is going to be played in Asia, whether it's about F-35s, whether it's about warships, whatever it is. What we're seeing now is the first little squalls, the spats that are taking place between the Philippines and Japan and China. But Taiwan, of course, has major issues. South Korea has issues as well. These are, and Vietnam, these are territorial claims, and it's about controlling the South China Sea and the Western Pacific. And the U.S., for its own reasons, and all those other countries want freedom of movement. And of course, the Chinese want freedom of movement too on their terms. But there are other things going on. Railways are being built. The Chinese are trying to use Burma to get to the Indian Ocean, to have a second route out of China. To get to the Middle East for products, mostly to get oil to keep their economic miracle going. All of this is taking place at an increasing pace. And I don't think we're yet near anything like a war, and I hope we never get to that point. But it's a complicated relationship, and it begs the question, what will Canada do, and what is our relationship today? I think it's fantastic that we're trading as much as we are with China, and we should do whatever we can to keep that going because it's so valuable to our economy. But we must also be prudent, and we must think about Asian defense and where we fit in. We belong to some of the Asian associations, and politically we probably are going to belong to more in the next year or two.
Let me bring you back to the American situation, though. Do you think America has a constructive role to play in resolving some of the territorial disputes that are ongoing in the eastern part of Asia?
China certainly does not think so.
Right.
China absolutely does not think so.
But how about the Philippines or Japan?
Well, they all think so, and I don't think the U.S. can have a role because China absolutely refuses to talk to them about it. But what it can do is keep the lanes open, and by putting the aircraft carriers more often in the Western Pacific act as a check. But the other thing that is happening, Steve, is there's this incredible Chinese military buildup. They've stolen the plans for the F-35. In Canada, it's a debate about the value of this aircraft. Well, the Chinese think it's hugely valuable. You could argue their #1 defense priority is to steal the stealth technologies that exist in the F-35. They have their first aircraft carrier that's put to sea. They're now using drones. They've had their fighter jets up by the islands claimed by Japan.
How do you know they've stolen the technology for the F-35?
There have been a number of reports about this. They stole it from the British, apparently, not from the Americans directly. The Wall Street Journal has done a lot of work about that. I take it as true because some people in the Canadian community that is interested in these things have told me that they are intensely interested in what Canada is up to, and we're very modest players in terms of the technologies for this so far.
There's one other country in Asia we have not mentioned yet, and they are, of course, a huge and will be continue to be a huger player in the future, and that's India. How do they factor into the U.S. so-called pivot?
Well, it's a question I asked when I was in India about 7 or 8 weeks ago, and they are very, very concerned about China. They've had their own border war in the north, and it did not go well for them. They are moving several divisions north in India of army troops to try to counter what the Chinese are doing. The Chinese have a huge road building project in southwestern China. India is 10, 20, 30 years behind in building this up. They also face this choice. It's a huge dilemma. What do we do? Do we join forces with the United States to check them, or do we maintain our neutrality? Well, so far everybody says we're going to try to get the best of both worlds. That's the Indian point of view now. But if China becomes the big player that it looks like it's going to be in 10, 20, 30 years, India and Russia, because it has its own issues in the Russian Far East too, may line up with the United States. The United States is trying very hard right now to be friends with India. India's normal military relationship has been with Russia for decades, but they have now bought a lot of C-17 transports. The Americans are trying to sell them fighter jets. They recently chose French fighter jets, not Russian and not American, but there are other things that they're selling them as well. Reconnaissance aircraft, refueling aircraft, all those things India is looking at. The Indians are expanding very dramatically their military, and they want to own the Pacific, or rather the Indian Ocean. And there have been books written about it already, about who will own that lake. Right now, the Indian Ocean is an American lake. China wants in. China has brought its warships in. They're becoming a deep water navy. They've conducted operations way to the west against Somali pirates.
Do you think that has the potential to turn into something scary?
It does, of course. It does, because these two countries have fought before, and they have unresolved border issues. It is a very live issue. But whether that happens sooner or later, I think it will be later. But the build-up to these things can take decades, the competition, and it is underway. And I think it's flying under the radar in a lot of places. It's being mentioned. The very fact Obama talked about the pivot suggests something is up, obviously.
Well, let's pivot, unlike Obama, let's pivot towards the Middle East, because I want to see what you have to think about the Arab Spring and what has taken place in places like Egypt and Tunisia and Libya. Generally speaking, do you think the arrow of history is pointed in the right direction in those countries?
No, but I think it's inevitable, the direction that it is pointed in. I should say that I've been to many Middle Eastern countries lately, but I've not been to Libya or Tunisia, but I've spent quite a bit of time in Egypt. And when the United States and others advocate for democracy, you have to be careful of what you wish for. And the democracy that is evolving there and what will happen in Syria, God forbid, will be very strongly Islamist in a way that is probably unfriendly to Western interests.
In which case, is America's interests, or excuse me, America's influence in the Middle East, do you think, growing, declining, staying the same, what?
Declining very rapidly. They still want American money. Egypt depends on American money for everything. That is why I believe they still have a relationship with the United States. But that's the only thing holding them back. What is happening is the U.S. is going to need less of the energy in the Middle East. And China is going to need more. Well, that in itself suggests a tilt. There's also a thing which I think Western journalists have not been truthful to Western audiences about the revolutions, particularly the Egyptian one. You recall all the scenes in Tahrir Square, and they interviewed all these beautifully eloquent young people speaking fabulous English, many of them young women, about our revolution. I saw a report here over Christmas in Canada in which she said we went and talked to an average Egyptian person, and she spoke beautiful American English, and she said, they will not take our revolution away from us. Well, her revolution has already been taken away from her. It's done.
By the Islamists.
By the Islamists. They've won now 5 different votes. It's 4 or 5 different votes, and they're getting about 70% of the vote collectively. The radical Islamists, the ones that are less extreme, whatnot, and the people who think like we do, if you like, are clearly in a minority. And we go again and again, so often as journalists, not only in Egypt, but to speak to people who are educated in the West and who speak like us. And then we tell our publics that this is representative of the country. And it's a huge mistake, a huge mistake.
Let's pivot again, Matthew, if we can. You've been in Europe. Which countries did you most recently visit in Europe?
I've been to Greece and Spain and Norway, France, Germany.
Is it possible to characterize the prevailing mood in the places that you went to and the people you talked to?
Norway and Sweden, they're pretty happy and pretty optimistic.
Times
it's
are
rather
good
like Canada. The South is a disaster, and the center of Europe frets that the South is going to haul them down. There is real anger growing in Greece, and it's manifesting itself in some pretty crazy and mean ways sometimes on the street. And there's total frustration with governments there. People do not understand. They're so used to the entitlements that they've had in Europe, and there's been such a real estate bubble that has burst in a country such as Spain. I mean, it makes the one that happened in the United States look like nothing. They're having an awful lot of trouble accepting that the party really is over and will be over probably forever. For Canada, we have passed the Mediterranean countries long ago, but we're now in the process of passing Britain, which has huge economic problems too, and France. Canadians don't really realize this, but we've moved forward. And in France and in Britain, they are starting to get a hold of some of their problems, but the French government now is worried. It's spending money again, money that it doesn't really have. The Germans, of course, and I lived in Germany for many years, and maybe that's the country in Europe I know the best. The German people hate what is going on everywhere else because they think they're going to have to pay for everything, and their idea is we have worked harder. This is only partially true. There are other, it's very complicated. They received huge support from the United States, the Marshall Plan and all this. So there are reasons why Germany got a better foundation after the Second World War than some of these other places. But there's tremendous unease, and people, all kinds of people tell me they're losing their homes. Kids tell me they won't take a job because it's beneath them. When I was in the Greek islands, there were Sri Lankans working there, Albanians, Poles, in all the jobs in all the hotels. And yet we're told that there's 40 or 50% youth unemployment in many places in Greece. And I would ask young Greeks about it, and they'd say, I'm not going there. I want to live with my friends here. Why should I have to move? And within your own country, if you won't take a job, you get what you deserve.
Well, let's stay in the south of the EU then. The head of the European Central Bank made pretty clear this past year he's planted his flag with that currency, and he has said he is prepared to defend it come hell or high water. Would you anticipate, and that gave the market some confidence, could that potentially portend a bit of a comeback for the EU in the upcoming year?
A little bit.
A little bit.
A little bit. I think we are past the apocalypse, and now they're just going to live with a miserable situation, and it will slowly improve, but it won't improve anywhere near to the point it was before. We're talking about something very small, but I do believe it is mostly stabilized. But countries like Portugal could still cause all kinds of problems. I don't think we're finished with the problems in Italy and Greece. There's a lack of acceptance of things, and basically you're ending up with three Europes. And you can do it economically. The north is fine, the middle is having problems and is anxious, and the south is a basket case. And the EU is in a way responsible for this because they all thought they'd all live like the Northern Europeans, and they spent to that level, and they got unbelievable lifestyles in terms of vacation, the homes that people have in Greece, people with rather modest jobs. They certainly were doing better than Canadians, but they're not doing better than Canadians today.
Let me take you to Africa now. We have seen that France has begun a military operation in a country that I suspect 98% of Canadians could not find on a map or maybe not even have heard of not too long ago, Mali. The Islamist groups have taken over the north. What do you make of what's going on there?
Well, it is not just Mali. That's part of the problem. There are a number of countries that Al-Qaeda is starting to operate in a big way. Northern Sudan is another, and the countries around Mali and to the north, there are whole big chunks of these countries that are totally unstable, or the government has no presence. It will be a real dog's breakfast. Again, the Americans have anticipated this in a way. They created an Africa Command a couple of years ago. But because Africa is so difficult to operate in, the Americans run Africa Command out of Stuttgart in Germany, which is one of these great ironies. But Al-Qaeda has been looking for a home. They've been kicked out of a number of homes. They went to Yemen, and certainly they had a good run in Iraq, but now that's a little more complicated. Then they moved into Africa. That is where they are now. And it's a hydra-headed monster because it's not Al-Qaeda. There are so many different brands there. But they all share certain ideas. One is that women should be treated abominably. I mean, that is a current that is almost universal there. And also music, television, all these things are terrible. And they want to go after Christians. And all of these countries, or most of these countries, have substantial Christian populations. It's also, there's a resentment of France's colonial legacy. France is going back to places that it actually held sway for a very long time.
And Mali's a former French colony, of course. Well, tell me this: the current president of the African Union was in Ottawa not too long ago, asking Prime Minister Harper for Canada to send troops over to Mali to help stabilize things. Is that a good idea that Canada should do that? Harper said no, of course.
I am for these things in general, although I do think we must be very careful. We shouldn't do them cavalierly. But I was told by somebody very well placed in the Canadian military just over the weekend that the message they are getting from the Harper government is very clear. It's not only about Mali, it's about everything in Africa. forget it. We will not be doing anything. The situation must change drastically before Canada would do anything. But we do fulfill a role with our C-17s. It hasn't been much discussed here, but one of the reasons we're able to do this is because we got them. France has no heavy lift capability, really, and that's why they're looking to others. And the whole idea when we got the C-17s wasn't just for adventures such as Afghanistan. It was also we're part of an alliance and we will fill niche roles. And that aircraft right now is doing one of the roles it was bought for in doing this. And I expect they'll probably stay there at least a few weeks, and I don't think it's the last time we're there. Also, Canadians don't really know, but our Special Forces guys have done a lot in Mali.
I just want to let the control room know I want to go long here because
Okay,
we've got a few things left to get to and we haven't got to them yet.
Sorry.
No, don't you
Sorry.
apologize. We need to get to these things. Because I want to quote you if I can do that.
Oh, gosh.
This is something you wrote way back in July of last year in the National Post. You said, Canada has never presumed that it was or could be the economic equal or superior of Spain or Italy, let alone France, Britain, or Germany. But with much of Europe in what looks like terminal decline and Asia keen to purchase staggering amounts of Canadian natural resources, one way or another, Canada is going to end up with a more influential role in the world. And I wonder if I could ask you to just amplify on that and talk about how you see us playing a more influential role in the world.
Well, I can tell you first that there's tremendous resistance to this idea. I've written about that a couple of times.
Resistance where?
From readers. Nothing gets them so exercised as any suggestion that we might be like the United States, although I've not suggested at all that we would be like the United States. But we are emerging, it is my belief, it is my conceit to believe that Canada will be the second most powerful Western nation. China will be far ahead, but in the world in 20 or 30 years. The Germans and Japanese are the only countries really that can rival us, and we will go forward with Australia. This means you take on responsibilities. Canada is so used to having the United States carry so much of the freight for us, and we've always wanted to be junior partners in everything. I think we're going to see over the next 10 or 20 years that it's no longer a case. The world will be looking to Canada because we will be so wealthy, because the prospects in the next 10 or 20 years look so good that we must do more. Also, the United States cannot do as much. And so I'm speaking here militarily, narrowly, but it's also about everything else.
But that seems to fly in the face of what you just said about the Harper government, which wants to get out of any further military entanglements.
One of the reasons for that is I think they poll a lot, and right now the Canadians aren't there, and Harper...
10 years in Afghanistan will do that for you.
It will, but frankly, in terms of how much we spent and what our economy is, I don't think it was that great a deal. Certainly, Korea and the Second World War were much greater deals. But Canadians have a different perspective on this now. And there is hostility to this. And Harper knows, he's a fellow who wants to be reelected, that there are certain areas where he cannot yet go where philosophically he might wish to. Or if he does not want to go to these places, certainly some of the people in his cabinet do.
I think it's fair to say that if you looked at a map in central or eastern Canada, people's orientation, and it goes back to when we were kids in school, your orientation is east towards Europe or south towards the United States, or if you're particularly sharp, even further south to the rest of the hemisphere, but not necessarily Asia. Do we in this country need to also pivot more towards Asia, if you like?
I absolutely believe that not only we need to, but we will. It is inevitable. When Asia becomes as important a trading partner, or nearly as important a trading partner as the United States, and that may happen over the next 20 or 30 years. It's likely to happen, although the United States will still obviously have a huge and profound effect on Canada in every way you can imagine, including economically. But it is inevitable, Steve, that this is going to happen. What we get now are resistance. People are exactly as you say they are. They're American-centric or Eurocentric still. But that is going to shift. It's also going to shift because the people who actually reside in Canada, more and more of them are going to be from Asia. Our number one for immigrants is the Philippines. China and India are right up there. I think they're 2 and 3. I'm not sure, but I believe those are the top 3. And those demographics are going to change. Those people will not feel as we do, as Italian Canadians do about Italy, or German Canadians do about Germany, or all the British people do about Britain. That is going to also change how Canadians think. All of this to me is inevitable, but there will be a lot of resistance along the way. Canadians don't want to spend more on their military. They don't really want us to lead international organizations. They don't get upset when we're excluded from international clubs. They don't get nearly upset enough about that, I believe. We have to, Douglas Hurd, the former British Foreign Secretary, always had this line about Britain punching above its weight. Well, Canada has consistently punched below its weight. And that must change, if by default, because who else is going to do it? Very few other countries will step up, and it is a very mean, cruel, complex world. And if you ask me what's going to happen in 2013, you know, it's a dog's breakfast in predicting.
Let me narrow the question a little bit. Of all of the things that we've talked about today, would you venture to speculate as to what will dominate our foreign affairs interests in 2013?
Well, I'll tell you, the biggest story is going to be the royal baby.
Okay, more serious.
No, but I'm serious about the way the media thinks.
I'm sure it will. But.
And Nelson Mandela's health will be the other great concern. But in terms of shifts, I think what we're going to continue to see is that Asia is rising, and there will be more friction in Asia, and slowly but surely the rest of the world will be drawn into this because we have interests. Of course, there are other big things going on. One is, will Europe continue to recover a bit economically? Another one is, will terrorists, will Islamists make further inroads in Africa? And of course, there's always the Middle East, and there's the Iranian question, and Syria. When Syria blows, whenever it falls apart, God help us, because we've seen nothing yet, I think, in terms of the violence that is likely there. And who can predict how it will end up, except I do think it will not end up very well for our interests at all, or the interests of our friends over there. Iran, well, it's a very interesting question, because most Israelis, or a majority of Israelis, don't want military action. Neither do their military leaders, but their government seems to want this. The American senior military leadership is completely opposed to this, but the Obama government is giving mixed signals on this, and we all know what the Republicans would like them to do. And of course, we know that the Canadian government is all for action, although we will have no part of it, but we're all for somebody doing something, even if it's not us. All of those things will be in play in 2013, but it's a mug's game to predict what will be number 1 or number 2 or when things might happen. But China is rising, and we don't have to fear China. We don't have to go to bed at night and worry about China and what horrible things it's going to do to us. It's nothing like that. But we have to really start to figure out an Asian policy that is beyond sending a trade minister, who's a very interesting fellow, Ed Fast, who goes on these big missions, and he has had some successes. But our policy must be a lot deeper than that, and a lot more involved than just having a minister out there waving the flag and saying, we're open, take our natural resources.
Matthew, it's always good of you to visit us when you spend your rare time in Canada and not on a plane going somewhere else around the world, and I hope you'll come visit us again next time you're in town.
Well, thank you, Steve.
Matthew Fisher, International Affairs columnist, Post Media News.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.